Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Woodman, and I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. In this video, we will talk about understanding cultural differences in terms of knowing how this plays into handling conflicts and disagreements. This is important because while you think you did something that was not a big deal, it could be a big deal to someone else if their culture is different from yours and their culture takes it seriously. After all, we live in a diverse society that has so many cultures. So if you experience a conflict with someone of a different culture, you want to be conscious of how to appropriately communicate with them. This video will not say that any culture is wrong, but we need to understand how cultures function before having in-depth conversations with people. Let's talk about the role of cultural differences in negotiations. The linguistic Richard Lewis was one of the first academics to grasp the importance of negotiation of cultural differences. When people from different countries meet to talk about business or talk about a business or a political agreement, using a common language is no guarantee that each side will understand the other. Cross-cultural negotiations that degenerate into confusion and personal bitterness can do so not because the other parties are disagreeing on substance, but because each is engaged in a different kind of conversation to the other. Lewis pointed out that before you negotiate with a person, you should figure out what that person thinks a negotiation is. You might think a negotiation is about choosing the best options for both of you, while the other person could think a negotiation is picking the lesser of two evils. Both of you have different interpretations of a negotiation, so it is important that you two define the terms and be on the same page before getting into the details of your conversation. One of Lewis's insights is that unless you take time to understand the other party's cultural worldview, you are liable to misunderstand what they are saying and misread their motivations. Essentially, culture shapes how people behave and what they say, which is why trying to have a tough conversation with someone without knowing where they are coming from, culturally as well as personally, is self-defeating. But remember, culture is not just a matter of country, but about perspectives, behaviors, and attitudes. If we fail to account for all of these things, then we are not truly understanding people's cultures and a conflict will occur. A common reason that negotiations and disagreements of any kind go bad is that one side, or both, has not made an effort to see things from the other's perspective. That cannot require not just the effort to consider another opinion, but to consider a whole other cultural worldview. Someone can have a problem with someone because their culture does not allow it, and we need to be aware of it. Since all of us have cultural and worldview differences, it does not affect how we understand and negotiate things. I've already mentioned the importance of learning other people's culture, but you should make yourself aware that you have a culture too, which is hard to do if you believe your worldview is somehow not a worldview at all, but just a natural way to see things. This is important because you can be raised in a setting that teaches you that your culture is a normal way of life and assume that it does not count as a unique culture compared to anyone else's culture that does something differently than yours. Again, what you do in one place is different in other places, and that is because the cultures are different. Seeing your own culture is not just a challenge for professional negotiators, but for everyone who interacts with people with different worldviews of our own, to our own, I should say. So we have to see what our behaviors are like and compare it to someone else's culture to see where we need to adjust to have a good conversation. Let's look at a couple of studies that get a sense of people's cultural behaviors. Joe Henrich was a graduate student in anthropology at UCLA. During that time, he traveled to the jungles of Peru to carry out fieldwork among the Michi-Gengwe, a people indigenous to the Amazon basin. Henrich ran a behavioral experiment used by Western economists to test people's instincts for fairness. He expected to find that even in an isolated culture like this one, people would play the game in roughly the same way as Westerners, since the prevailing assumption among social scientists was that humans share the same physiological hardwiring. The experiment was a bargaining game in which two participants had to agree to split a given amount of money in a way satisfactory to both. When the game was played with American students, people's instincts for fairness meant they would reject a low value of cash from the other individual, even if it meant both walking with nothing. But as it turned out, the Michi-Gengwe found this absurd because why would anyone turn down free money? Henrich wondered if the assumption of universalism made by economists and psychologists was deeply misleading. He led a study of 14 other isolated small societies from Tanzania to Indonesia and found that all of them play the game differently to North Americans and Europeans. Together with collaborators, Henrich went on to reveal that a whole range of established findings in psychology, from spatial awareness to moral reasoning, did not apply to people who were from cultures other than Western industrialized countries. This work accumulated into a 2010 paper entitled, quote, "The Weirdest People in the World." By weird, essentially, that's the acronym for it, Henrich and his fellow authors meant the 50% of humans who are Westerners, Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. That's what that, like, again, that's the acronym for weird. Henrich wanted to convey that the Western mindset was not just different to the rest of the world, it was deeply, interestingly odd, that if anything, it is we in the West, not people like the Michigan way, who are the truly exotic tribe, until scientists understand that they cannot claim to understand humans at all. People with a weird mindset are more likely to punish people who are, or who seem to be cheating them with a lowball offer because they live in communities in which strangers often do business with one another. People from a close-knit communities like the Michigangwe perceive the offer as a gift that comes with obligations. The Michigangwe in Joe Henrich's test, for example, had been more likely to reject the generous offers than the modest ones. The larger the gift, the more burdensome the obligation. To them, it looks like they have to owe more back if they take a large thing for themselves. Weird people tend to be more analytical by giving up situations into parts and assigning them to abstract categories. Those with a more holistic mindset, like East Asians, focus on the relationships between things and between people, relying more on intuition to figure out what is going on. For instance, when study respondents are presented with a diagram showing a scarf, a glove, and a hand, and are asked to pick the two most closely related objects, Westerners tend to pick the scarf and glove because both are pieces of winter clothing, while East Asians are more likely to pick the hand and glove because of their close relationship to one another. Inspired by Henrich's work, cultural psychologist Thomas Talhelm ran tests like this with groups of American conservatives and liberals. He found that liberals and conservative thinking, he found that liberals and conservatives think as though they are from completely different cultures. Liberals are more weird than conservatives, more analytical, readier to think in abstractions. So when you see American liberals and conservatives have so many disagreements, they perceive reality in fundamentally different ways. While both sides think their worldview is normal, their mutual misunderstanding is not symmetrical. Jonathan Haidt, a political psychologist, also ran a study in the United States, one that asked liberals and conservatives the same set of questions about moral and political issues. Then he asked the liberals to answer like conservatives, and the conservatives to answer like liberals. The conservatives were significantly better at predicting how liberals would respond than vice versa. Haidt concluded, quote, "Conservatives understand liberals better than liberals understand conservatives." I bring these studies up to show you how we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach when we deal with different cultures. It all comes down to what people in each culture believe in, how they behave, and how they mentally process certain things. You now know the context behind this thinking process. Let's talk about using an empathetic and human-centered approach in a negotiation. As we talked about before in this video series, empathy is the key to seeing and understanding people's experiences. In many types of disagreement, there is often a party who seeks to play the game by their rules of engagement and a party who questions those rules. One side sees themselves as reasonable, the other as if they are being ever so politely stamped upon. Pain and rage build up under the surface of an apparently polite conversation because, again, the other side does not feel like they are being seen and considered. When we bring culture into this, it is saying that your culture is more significant or reasonable than the other person's culture. When you think that way, you feel less inclined to get to know the other person's culture and experience because theirs don't mean much to you. So instead of coming from a place of superiority, take some time to understand who you are engaging with, and how they practice their culture. Figure out how certain responses you could make can come across to the other person based on their culture. Remember, you can't control other people's reactions, but you can control yourself. You can control how respectful and professional you are to the other person. And if you do something that makes the other person uncomfortable because of their culture, you need to do your best with listening to them and seeing where they are coming from. You do not want to argue with someone over their culture or say their culture is wrong, because you will come across as disrespecting them, and it is not the main point of what you actually want to discuss with them. You do not want to turn a conflict or disagreement into, you don't want to turn a conflict or disagreement you have with someone into their culture. We have to put ourselves in the mindset of another person's culture. Of course, for some of us, it is incredibly hard to step outside of your own cultural bubble and see how odd it might seem to others, or to enter another person's mindset and get a sense of how it might feel normal to them. It rarely shows itself in our conversations with others like us. This means when you have conversations with people in the same culture as you might not always think about someone else's culture. But the truth is, we are all partially sighted. This might be even more true of those of us who pride ourselves in being objective and analytical, since we have a pronounced tendency to assume ours is the only valid way to perceive the world. Cultural differences aren't just a matter of East versus West. A country has a unique culture, but so do towns, workplaces, families, and long-standing relationships. Because of that, we all meet different people and experience different things. In fact, even among people who have grown up in the same places, attended similar schools, and watched the same shows, each individual will still have acquired their own varied skills, habits, knowledge, and traditions. That is why we can't always assume people who grow up in the same environment will be alike forever. As much as you should not make a disagreement or conflict about someone's culture, you are likely going to encounter this situation at some point in your life. It is called a culture clash. It usually happens only when we bump up against someone with a different way of seeing the world. An encounter like this can trigger a threat state, leading us to dismiss or demonize the other. But that stops us from hearing what the other person is saying. To make yourself less prone to this reaction during a disagreement, try thinking about yourself as a visitor from a distant land with a very distinctive culture. You will need to work hard at understanding the culture of your host, but you will also need to reflect on your own. What experiences shaped your point of view? What are your blind spots likely to be? Which beliefs and habits of thought have you inherited? Once you have this deep reflection about your culture, you will start to know that your culture is not always perfect, and neither is someone else's culture. In conclusion, understanding cultural differences is essential for handling conflict, disagreement, and negotiation in today's diverse world. Culture shapes how we communicate, what we value, how we define certain things, and even how we interpret someone else's tone or intentions. When we don't recognize that, we risk turning simple misunderstandings into unnecessary conflict. We have seen that there is no single normal way to think, negotiate, or behave. The research we looked at in this video shows that even ideas we assume are universal can vary widely across cultures and worldviews. That means the way you see a situation may feel completely reasonable to you, while someone from a different culture may see it in a totally different light. Neither side is automatically wrong, but just different. We need to practice empathy and self-awareness, because it is not enough to try to understand the other person's culture, but also recognize that we have a culture too, with our own assumptions, habits, and blind spots. When we slow down, listen, and try to see where the other person is coming from, we create space for more respectful and productive conversations. We take on this opportunity to learn, build trust, and find better solutions together. The goal isn't to agree on everything, but it is to understand each other well enough to disagree with respect and move forward constructively. In the next video, we will talk about expressing curiosity in conflicts and disagreements. Until then, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and turn on the post notifications so you will be notified when I post my next video. I appreciate your support. Remember, you are powerful, you are capable, and you are the changemaker our society needs. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you soon.